Our second speaker of this session is Dr. Shaker Al-Shbib, and I hope that I more or less pronounced it correctly. He is a Syrian archaeologist who was educated at universities of Damascus and then afterwards at Paris 1. He worked as at the Syrian General Directorate of Antiquities and Museums, and was also Director of Excavations and Archaeological Research in the Idlib region. As such, he has been working on several excavations in Syria, and he was also co-director of the Syrian-French excavations at Pamea. Currently, Dr. Al-Shbib is associated with the Smithsonian and with UPenn Museum as an heritage expert. And since January 2014, he's been working with the Safeguarding the Heritage of Syria and Iraq project on emergency conservation measures at key Syrian heritage sites at risk. And I think that it's on those elements that he's going to come and give us a lecture today. Please, Doctor.
Good evening. So, first of all, I would like to express my pleasure for being here, and I would like to thank the organizer of this meeting for the invitation. So, in this lecture, I will try to present a general idea about the museum in Syria, before and during the conflict, how this museum were, the damage they were subjected to, and the measures taken to protect the museum. This lecture will be divided into the following three paragraphs. General introduction to the museum in Syria, damage to museum in Syria during the last years, measures applied to protect the museum in Syria since the beginning of the conflict. So, museum in Syria until 2011. Syria had 38 museums distributed across the centers of the main governorates and cities in Syria. There are archaeological museums, about 20, specialty museums like mosaic or medicine, art, etc. Site museum, we have in this map, we have all this museum in Syria. And site museum built on a building or on an important element of an archaeological site. And popular folklore museum in most of the big city. The majority of these museums have been established in archaeological or historical buildings. For example, church, caravanserais, old houses or palaces. Most of the archaeological museums were established in modern buildings. As we saw some pictures of some museums in Syria. Generally, the collection were displayed in a chronological order, from prehistoric to historic times, and then the classic and Islamic period. Some museums included also modern art galleries, or some folklore exhibited. Concerning the security and equipment allocated to this museum, unfortunately, all of the museums suffered a lack in the means of protection. Museums were neither equipped with fire and burglar alarms, nor they were equipped with surveillance cameras, except for Damascus, Aleppo, and Idlib Museum, where surveillance cameras were installed in 2010 through an Italian project. The guard system in this museum was very weak, especially at night. Most of the museum relied on 3 or 5 civilian guards, and there were not trained forces designated to directly supervise the protection of the museum. The main problem in most of the Syrian museum, however, was lacking an electronic archive of museum collection, which were documented only to a later date with on a paper recorders and folders. And all this made endangered all this collection to losing the historical and scientific identity in case of misspelling or losing a record. This situation cannot be generalized to all museums, for a few of them have already completed their electronic archive. Damage to museum between 2011 and 2017. Since 2011, the Syrian museum have been affected in one way or another by war, either by destruction or by theft or vandalism. So I will try to give you some examples about that. The theft. There are 7 cases known so far in which archaeological artifacts were stolen from museums in Syria, and these cases are Hammam Museum. We lost this statuette, or golden statuette, to the Aramaic period in 12, sorry. Abamia Museum with some stone marble was stolen in 2012 also. Maarat Museum. So this one, Maarat. I don't have photo of Abamia's Hammam. Maarat Museum. Many artifacts were stolen in 2012, beginning 2013, but we don't have any list of this object. And the same thing for the Raqqa Museum. A lot of artifacts was stolen in 2013 when the opposition force take control of the city. And in the same case, in this city, Raqqa, we have another storage was Herakles storage was also a lot of object was stolen. This storage have a lot, about thousands and thousands of artifacts not documented in this storage. The last case in Museum of Ja'far Castle Museum, about 17 terracotta were stolen also. All this happened in 2012 and 2013. And recently in 2015, Palmyra, after ISIS arrived to the city, a lot of objects was stolen, and Busra also. We lost some artifacts from Busra Museum. Using museum for military purposes, which has continuously happened since to the end of 2011, when the Deir ez-Zor Museum, Marra Museum, and National and Folklore Museum in Homs were used as a military outpost, by government force. This was also the case in archaeological site, which resulted with serious damage to these cultural assets. Obviously, the situation was not better with the transition of control to the opposition force, which has also damaged several archaeological sites and buildings. In this photo, we see the Marra Museum. We started with soldier for the government soldier stay in the museum. And 2012, when the opposition controlled the museum, they also used this museum for the military purposes. Bombardment. Locating the government forces within archaeological sites and buildings made them vulnerable to the fire of the opposition force. In the same manner, the regime forces tended to bombard many cities out of their control, regardless of the residential religious or cultural function of this building they target. The example of the Idlib, Maarat and Busra Museum were targeted intentionally by the regime. How you see all this example in this photo. Busra Museum in the castle on the theater of the Busra, Aleppo Museum, Maarat Museum, and Idlib Museum, and the Palmyra Museum. Vandalism. The only case of vandalism of museum is what happened in the Palmyra Museum after the ISIS took control of the city, as we saw in this picture. Measures applied to protect the museum in Syria since the beginning of the conflict. What measures have been applied to mitigate the impact of the crisis on the museum? Before answering to the question, some factors must be emphasized. Lack of advanced mechanism or plans to protect museum. Lack of expertise and educated training for museum staff for emergency intervention during crisis. The museum building themselves are not equipped and not prepared for such risks. It is clear that the museum were not educated, prepared prior to the conflict in Syria, especially in the absence of evacuation plans, emergency intervention, and the lack of the basic means of protection. This intensified the risk on this museum during the last 6 years. The worst of all is the lack of intent and determination on all sides of the Syrian conflict to avoid museum and spare them the damage. The greatest responsibility, however, lays on the government side, given that it is internationally recognized as the sole body authorized to care for and protect the Syrian cultural property. Various measures have been implemented based on the different region and circumstances. The most important action taken since 2011. Until the end of 2011, no action was taken to protect the museum. The Syrian authorities, on the other hand, did not take proactive measures to prevent damage to this museum. At the beginning of 2012, key artifacts were transferred from both the Aleppo and Damascus Museum to safe havens. Similar measures were implemented at a later stage around the end of 2012 at both Hama and the Raqqa Museum. Other, however, like Idlib, Maarat, Homs, Deir ez-Zor, Dar'a Museum did not receive the same proactive measures. Efforts to develop electronic archive were intensified. The work started in Aleppo and was completed around the middle of 2012. The experience was then repeated in Damascus. Unfortunately, this work has not been completed, and many museums remain without any electronic archive. Around the same time, at the end of 2012, the display halls were evacuated of their content, except for stone and big objects. These artifacts were kept in the storage of the museums. This was the case in most of the Syrian museums, especially in the provinces mostly affected by the conflict. But as mentioned earlier, these stories are not at their best condition, and the artifacts were not really safe from destruction or theft. At the end of 2014 and the beginning of 2015, and due to the deficiency of the previously mentioned measures, and as a result to the event that took place at the Raqqa Museum, the decision was made to relocate all artifacts, transferred all artifacts from around Syria to safe storage. This storage were either in Damascus or in other city far from the conflict. There was no clear vision for the decision that were made for protect the Syrian museum. This decision were mostly instantaneous and did not have an outlook toward the future. Lacking experience and preparedness prevented decision makers for reaching effective solution and at an early stage of the conflict. Other approaches were flawed and successful. This was the case for both of the museum, Aleppo and Idlib museum. As we will see, all the measures mentioned so far were done by the General Directorate of Antiquity and Museum in Syria, because most of the museums in Syria remained in areas under the control of the Syrian government, except for the museum Raqqa Maarat in 2013, when the opposition controlled this city, and Idlib and Busra in 2015. So now I will try to present you some examples in two different areas. Areas controlled by government and areas controlled by opposition regime. So just for give you more example about what we do for protect museum in Syria. So for the regime area, I will speak about Aleppo and Idlib museum. And in the second hand, I will speak about another museum, Maarat museum, and another archaeological project for protecting the archaeological site. So Aleppo museum, it is probably the only museum where several measures were applied to protect the artifact by acquisition of the curators of this museum. At the start, the staff of the museum worked to assess threats to the building and the artifact. The risks as identified were theft, armed attack, explosion, and shooting projectile. Indeed, the building was later exposed to few shells and nearby explosion, as we see in this picture. While the building was damaged, the artifacts were unharmed. The response was the following. After completing the electronic database of the museum, the electronic archive was saved in several places, and a copy was sent to Damascus. Later, the movable objects on display were evacuated and stored in warehouses, as you see in this place. So just to see the damage museum before to the and this after, when the building damaged because the projectile actually in bombardment. So they remove all the objects that can be moved from the holes. The following step was to protect the exterior doors of the museum and the stories. These doors are closed by building walls from outside, as we see in this picture, and reinforced them with iron doors from the inside. So buildings wall outside and iron door inside. Concrete walls were also built to protect rare and important statues, as we see in this picture. So they is building this wall for around of this statue. And large stone pieces were taken down on their face to protect the inscription. And it assembled just put down in the face where the inscription to protect the inscription. The other statues and inscription were covered with sandbag also, as you see in this. But the bags did not resist for long due to the weather condition, as we see in this photo. They were replaced later with wooden box that surrounded the statue, as we see in this. So they take off the back sandbag and put this case of wooden. The statue were insulated with fireproof glass fiber, and the vacuum were filled with sand. The second example, Idlib Museum. During 2011 and 2012, no measures were taken to protect the museum. In 2013, the artifacts were conserved and stored in the museum's warehouses. The doors of the warehouses were then hidden by construction double stone walls. I don't have any picture from Aleppo Museum because the work was they did in top security. The only entrance to these warehouses was firmly sealed. So I have this picture after all this work, when the opposition force take control of the city. Our colleagues, our team go to the museum for just observe it and try to save what we can save. So now it's not a secret. You can see this corridor. Before this, the only entrance to the stores underground. So you can imagine here this whole MBT was about 2 meters, and they fill up all this with stone, with sand, and they make the soil, the ground with like the underground in the museum, just for close this entrance. It was the only entrance for the stores. And from outside, they have small window like this, very small, just so they built this platform for so nobody can imagine there are any windows here. So I will repeat. The door of the warehouses were then hidden by construction double stone walls. The only entrance of these warehouses was firmly sealed. The external window that indicate the existence of these warehouses were also sealed. Those steps made detecting the warehouses by those who do not already know them almost impossible. This was probably, for my opinion, the best of all the measures that have been applied. Unfortunately, this method failed for two reasons. First, the implementation of these measures was not limited to a certain number of people. In other words, full confidentiality was not observed. Second, the museum was bombarded with a poisonous barrel which revealed the existence of these warehouses. As you saw in this photo, just in the third day when the opposition controlled the city, the museum was bombarded and the barrel fell in this area, outside, and open hole in the wall, and all the solid went. This is why we have not been able to guarantee the safety of the museum despite contacting the opposition forces with the help of some civilian figures. Since the opposition took control of the museum in March 2015, there is currently no precision information about all of the artifacts. But the efforts continue to get more information about the fate of the artifacts and to enter to the museum and save the remaining stone object and mosaic. On the other hand, a team of archaeologists seek to protect site and museum in opposition-controlled areas in north and south of Syria. Between 2014 and 2017, with the support of the Smithsonian Institute and Pennsylvania Cultural Heritage Center, we have been able to provide support to this team and to implement some protection project for archaeological sites, artifacts, and museums, such as the Maarat Museum. This initiative was called SHUSI project, Safeguarding Heritage of Syria and Iraq. With this project, we were able to accomplish the following project, as you see in this slide. So actually, I changed my conference yesterday for added this project. I think I will speak only about the museum, but I think it's good to add a brief idea about what we do from 2014 for protect the site and museum. And so I will show some picture about what the project that we implemented in this area, in the north of Syria, in Idlib. And after that, I will talk about the Maarat Museum. So the first thing, so we started with training. In Turkey, we formation training for our team working in this area about conserving the artifact or museum. And after that, they started to preserving and protecting the artifacts. Actually, they saved thousands and thousands of artifacts, and they kept it in houses. So we supported him to some materials to preserve all this material. And I hope in the future we can build a refuge for these artifacts. The second project is preserving and protecting the archaeological site. We have implemented a lot of projects. I will show only some pictures from Ebla, the site of Ebla. We just tried to save it. The wall could be collapsed, so we just made some stone and some just for supporting all these walls. And on the other hand, we work a lot, and we have a lot of activity for work with the local community. So we try to make some activity with children in school. We make some visits to take them to visit the archaeological site, or to some activity to restoration, or another link for excavation. So we try to link this link with this local community, and we make some conference in the village or for the archaeological students also. Now I'll go to speak about Maarat Museum, what we do in this museum for protect the mosaic in this building. So Maarat Museum it's an old building, caravanserais from Ottoman period, 16th century, and in this museum we have more than 600 meters of mosaic from all the Syria. Signed 2012, when opposition force entered the city, the museum was damaged as a result of the armed clash. After that, the museum was severely damaged by the shelling. Most showcases were broken and its content was stolen, as we see in this photo. Artillery and air raid caused big damage to the building, and most of the windows were badly destroyed. As all undertaken effort failed to spare the museum, the ongoing conflict by leaving its administration to civilians, some measures were needed to protect the most important artifacts of the museum, that means the mosaic. In the first stage of work, all restrictions caused by bombardment were repaired. All holes in the roof were cleaned, and grid guards were laid then with cement filled. For example, the same building materials of this, we use the same building materials for the ceiling. The broken arches were repaired and rebuilt using the similar materials to match well with original building, as you saw in these pictures. In the second stage, we cleaned the building of the museum, because for 3 years stay included. So we cleaned all the museum. The mosaic were then very carefully cleaned of dust that covered them. Then the next step was to apply a facing with a layer of glue and then with flesh bond cloth, as you see in this picture. So we clean the mosaic, we apply the glue facing, and we put the cloth on this mosaic. Finally, the walls were strengthened from inside to absorb the negative effect and to avoid collapse. Sandbags were put down against the mosaic hung on the wall and in front of them to offer more protection and to minimize the damage in case of a wall collapse. As you see in this, we start to put sandbags in all the museum. It should be noted that all this material were applied on the mosaic can easily be cleaned or taken off without causing any negative effect to the mosaic. But unfortunately, the museum was bombed by the regime in June 2015, and part of the building was destroyed. As you see in this target buried on this in the museum. The good news that the sandbag have played an important role, and they have much reduced the effect of the bombing. I will see in this photo. So this hole in this area exactly. So the mosaic is safe. Alhamdulillah, I'm safe. It's clear that risk preparedness. Maybe I have another photo of this museum just for the situation. It's very sad. I'm sorry, I will finish with this picture. In the end, it is clear that risk preparedness is a necessity. Risk preparedness can be achieved first by creating an electronic database that document all the objects of the museum, and by connecting the database of all museums through a national archive. Risk preparedness can be achieved also by conducting regular training for the staff of the museum, and the preparation plans in advance to comfort the various risks that threaten our museum. Most important measures must be developed and equip the museum with the state-of-the-art equipment to facilitate their protection. And thank you very much. I'm sorry for my English.
Thank you, Shaker, for this lecture. I think that it brought it all home once again, just like Lamia's lecture in the morning, what kind of horrors that can be done to museums. So it looks as if it's very difficult to protect them, in spite of the fact that obviously very different methods have been tried out. But I'm sure that there will be questions from the audience for the people, for France or for Shaker. So please raise your hand if you have, because there is a microphone coming around. Let me start by asking a question then to Shaker, and to ask Shaker what you think would be the best thing for the international community to do now to help with conservation of those things that have not been destroyed, and I still think that hopefully is the majority of all the riches.
Let us ask him what he can put. Because
Wait, let's can we have the microphone, please?
I'm not sure if I have answer about that, but if they accept to help the association or the archaeologist who worked in this area, it would be a good thing. Because until now we worked but we didn't get any support from this institution, UNESCO, I think, all this. I'm not. Maybe it's not easy to organize some cooperation. I'm not sure. No?
But just to complete, I think Syria is the most complicated, and it's not because we shouldn't do anything, but I'd like to explain that what things have changed is that there's a political situation where some countries we work with are not allowed to work in government-controlled areas. And I have colleagues who say, France, if I do this and it supports a government-controlled area, I go to jail. It's the case of the Americans, for example. And other countries who did not have this line have changed over 6 months ago. Some scholars you all know have been into a lot of trouble only for going to Damascus for a conference to try to support their colleagues. So this is very difficult because what ICON does is support their colleagues on the ground, and the political situation in Syria has rendered this much more difficult than just the conflict. Just having an armed conflict makes things impossible, but now on top of it, we have the diplomatic and political situation that makes it more difficult. And I think, unfortunately, we've been looking at how we can support projects in Iraq because it's more feasible, if I may say, diplomatically and politically, which is insane. I'm saying it, so it's important. I'm glad you made this presentation so we understand that we need to keep helping them through non-political ways, but taking into consideration that there are implications for certain countries.
Yes, indeed. Okay, please. Then afterwards.
Just adding to what Franz said, I'm a partner, if you don't know, I'm from ICROM. And ICROM is an intergovernmental organization, and we have been working consistently with the UNESCO EU project in Syria. And the office has been set up in Lebanon. And we have been systematically training many Syrians from DGAM, Directorate General of Antiquities. And unfortunately, being an intergovernmental organization, we cannot work with the, let's say, in the rebel-held areas or other areas. But we have, as Franz said, the exchange of scholars is important. And that you are here is also very important. And another thing that I would like to say is that the methodologies that are created, for example, the first aid methodology also benefited the Sochi project. So I'm happy to see that. And the knowledge that is created is for everybody. So that, I think, should be the goal. I think the best way to help is to make sure that we have methods, techniques, and colleagues to call in times like this. So I think that's, and yes, of course, we need to speak with non-state actors as well as with governments. And that's something, again, that has to be brought in systematically in our education.
Yes.
And I didn't have time. Some of our first aid courses, we have mediation and negotiation. And as I think that's a skill, as Brian said, we are trained for archaeology, but not for mediation, not for negotiation. But that's something that is an added skill that is needed. Thank you.
I think there's another question, and then a question there.
Okumuştum daha önce. Çatışmanın ilk yıllarında da Türkiye'den, hatta İKOMOS'un danışmanı olan kuruluşlar, İKORP ve benzeri kuruluşlar internet üzerinden Suriye'deki müzelerdekilere eğitim vermişlerdi bu şekilde. Yani müzelerdeki objelerin nasıl korunacağına dair UNESCO'nun alt kuruluşları olan birimler internet üzerinden, ama o zaman tabii çatışma bu kadar sıcak değildi. İlk yıllarda bu şekilde bir eğitim uygulandığını ben okumuştum daha önce de.
Evet.
Teşekkür ederim.
I'm just, it's not only a question, but as the museums quite a lot, for instance in Iraq, not only damaged, but lost. We've lost thousands of these objects. And quite a lot of these objects were excavated by foreign expeditions. And so the documentation now is very important to be a cooperation with these expeditions to see, because the director of the museum said, now for sure we have 11,000 missing. We still are doing the inventory, so we may have more. But the thing is to see where they came from. And so the documentation really is, with the help, with other, it's very important to know what we lost. Yeah.
Indeed, international collaboration and documentation seems that's coming back in each of the lectures that we've had today.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions? Yes, here in front.
My question is to France. As a member of Turkish committee of ICOMOS, I didn't see the name of ICOMOS appearing on the screen as an international organization. I wish that it should be a good relation between ICOMOS Risk Committee and ICOM. I think this must be adjusted on time.
I think she's just behind you, so she will.
Thank you. I did mention ICOMOS because when I said that we're the founding four, as we call each other, of the Blue Shield, so we work very closely with ICOMOS. And when we created our Disaster Risk Management Committee, and then when ICOMOS created its, we cooperated closely with them. And now, usually when there are things in this area, we cooperate with the chair of this committee. So I did not name them only because when I was talking about illicit traffic, they're in charge of immovable cultural heritage, and they're not part of this network I mentioned. But we do have relationships with them. We're both based in Paris, and we're very similar. And actually, for the story, ICOMOS was an international committee of ICOM, and then it became an independent organization. So we have close historical ties. And if I may, you asked a question at the beginning when you talked about assets. And I wanted to, if I can take this opportunity, I wanted to address it in my talk, and I didn't have time. When I talk about the market, how the market threatens cultural objects, the fact that since the Second World War these objects have become financialized, monetized, they have a big financial value, and they're treated as financial assets. I would just be careful with this word, because this is what values them. Of course, this is what makes them important, and this is the level to which the museum have heightened them, but at the same time now, their value, financial value, is what threatens them. So I just wanted to say that I agree that maybe the name heritage is not as strong as you would like it to be, but the name Hasset is a double-edged sword. I just wanted to say that.
If there are no further questions, then I think it would be a good idea to give a short break, and then afterwards we are continuing with the second session. Thank you very much to both the speakers and to the audience for your